Father, we thank you this morning in your presence. We honor you, God. God, as we come in His presence, oh God, we thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for this great man and woman of integrity that you set to govern this country. God, I pray that integrity will be their garment, integrity will be their lifestyle. I pray your blessings and favor, God, as you put a heavy mandate on them. God, that they will lead this people, lead this country in the way that you will lead them. Bless them. Let your kingdom come in their life. I pray, God, that the favor of God will go before them. Make every rough road smooth and crooked path straight. I pray your blessings upon them, God, as you have entrusted them with so much. God, that they will be good keeper of the gift. They will be good keeper of that which you have placed in their hands. Lead them and guide them. Father, that integrity will be their garment, whether in the workplace, wherever they go. God, that they will sit and they will sit at your feet. And I pray, God, that you will give them wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. After you would Solomon would have done all, you asked him, what is his heart desire? He said, I want wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. I rest that present in this room today. I rest that anointing in this room today. Father God, and I thank you because your kingdom will come and your will be done. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Philip Davis, Jessica Cooper, Brad Mitchell, Dennis Hannah Martin, Obadiah Wilson, Alfred Sears, Dr. Michael Darwell, Clay City, Keith Bell, Wayne Monroe, Vaughn Miller, Robert Colby Davis, Ginger Moxie, Mario Boleg, Jomo Campbell, Basil McIntosh, Miles LaRota, Pia Glover Roll, Lisa Ramming, Zane Lightbourne, Dr. Hubert Minnis, Jamal Strawn, John Pinder, Marcus Roll, Leon Lundy, Kirk Cornish, Wade Watson, Leonardo Lightbourne, Leslie Miller Bryce, Leroy Major, Sylvanus Petty, Mikel Bonnaby, Michael Pintard, James Kwesi Thompson, Aram Lewis, Shannon Don Cartwright, Adrian Gibson, Adrian White.
Good morning, honorable members. It was indeed my esteemed pleasure yesterday to be a part of the handing over ceremony of the new Commissioner of Police. Indeed, I want to give fair congratulations to both ex-Commissioner Roll for doing a stellar job, and also to our new Commissioner of Police, Commissioner Clayton Fernanda, as he proceeds. And I want him to know that he will get the full measure of this House as it relates to anything that he would need moving forward. Thank you, honorable members. Now let's get on with the people's business. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. The Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiative Act, Appointed Day Notice 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents. The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table a copy of the following: the Price Control General Amendment Number 8 Regulations 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up.
2722. Wow.
Thank you. Order the document do lie on the table. For the laying of documents, the chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Health Services COVID-19 General Amendment Number 4 Rules 2022 and the Health Services COVID-19 Prevention and Management of Community Spread Amendment Number 11 Rule 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order the document be brought up.
6/7/22. And that way. Thank you, man.
Order the documents do lie on the table. For the laying of documents, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to lay on the table a copy of the following: the Bahamas National Trust Preservation of National Parks Bylaws 2022, the Bahamas National Trust Election Procedures for Elected Members of Council Bylaws 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. Order the documents do lie on the table. For the lay. Thank you, honorable members. Statements and communications by ministers. Okay. Yeah. The chair recognizes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Pinewood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Rehabilitation of Offenders, Expunging of Records, Offences Order 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order the document be brought up. Yes. Okay. Order that document do lie on the table. Ms. Forbes? Thank you. For the laying of documents? Thank you, honorable member. Statements and communication by ministers? Thank you, honorable member. Communications by the clerk? Messages from the Governor General? Messages from the Senate? Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign, seat and new writs? Presentation of petitions? Presentations of reports of committees? Adoption of reports of committees? First reading of bills? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rum, Kings, and Salvador.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following bill. A bill for an act to regulate the trading of carbon credits in or from within the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order
If
the
I can have a
document.
second.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time and tabled. Carbon Credit Trading Bill 2022. Order that the bill be read as first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to regulate the trading of carbon credits in or from within the Bahamas.
Thank you. For the first readings, order the document do lie on the table.
Okay. Madam Speaker,
Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Vinewood.
I beg leave to lay on the table for the first reading a copy of the following bill, Madam Speaker. This is not the original one, Dave. It's the offences. A bill for an act to amend the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up.
Seconded.
A second. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a first time and tabled. Rehabilitation of Offenders Amendment Bill 2022. Order that the bill be read a first time and tabled. As many as in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act.
For the first readings? Thank you, Honourable Member. Second reading committal of bills. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Pinewood.
Madam Speaker, I rise in this place on behalf of the good people of the Pinewood constituency, for whose support they have given to me. I am forever grateful, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I get into my contribution, there's a few housekeeping matters I'd like to clean up. Madam Speaker, like you, I would like to commend or congratulate the new Commissioner of Police, Mr. Clayton Fernanda, who I know personally along with his wife. I would also deserving of the job, and I'm sure he will do an excellent job. I too would also like to thank the outgoing commissioner, former Commissioner Paul Roll, for his service, exemplary service to our country. Madam Speaker, I would like to offer condolences to the family of the late Enid Ferguson of Sequoia Street in Pinewood. I've known her via her son Dave for many years. And for all of those families who are experiencing death, I would like to offer condolences and prayers. Madam Speaker, summer is here, and in Pinewood we have quite a few activities going on, in particular Urban Renewals Program, summer program for the elderly and for the young. We also have Ms. Coralie Brathwaite, Dove Learning Center, who is in collaboration with Cleveland Indian School, is putting on summer classes from July 4th until the 21st, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Madam Speaker, the programs of going on presently, we are repairing potholes in this rainy season. I invite all members of the community to just continue the process of pinning those locations. The Honorable Member for Fort Charlotte and his team has done a good job in assisting us in repairing those. We are forever grateful. Also, I would also like to thank the member for Mount Moriah Parks and Beaches Authority. Apart from those contracts issued, I have had a few occasions to call him for areas that were not covered. And I would like to personally thank the honorable member for his swift attention to those matters. The Pinewood constituency is forever grateful for him. Madam Speaker, there's an ongoing cleanup campaign. We will be through Poinciana sometime this week. There has been a lot of dumping in the area. And I would like to do two things: discourage members of the public from dumping. Let us be our neighbor's keeper. These are our communities. And apart from the unsightliness, we are talking about things like rats, rodents, and other animals that wreak havoc on the community. Madam Speaker, I rise to move the second reading and committal of the following: a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril. Madam Speaker, the Evidence Amendment Number 2 bill is so short, or few letters, it seems almost inconsequential. But the reality, Madam Speaker, is that this bill has far-reaching significance and consequences. Madam Speaker, from the long title of the bill, it is very clear that what this piece of legislation is seeking to do. I doubt there will be any opposition to such an equitable amendment to the Evidence Act, which has been a part of the statute laws of the Bahamas for quite some time. Madam Speaker, I can think of a number of circumstances of peril whereby a person may go missing. Sometimes the disappearance lasts for decades without any resolution. This is where the enactment of this piece of legislation becomes important. Sometimes, Madam Speaker, when a person vanishes into the proverbial thin air in circumstances of peril, that creates a myriad of challenges for the families and friends left behind. Madam Speaker, one of the purposes of this proposed amendment to the Evidence Act is to bring closure to the family and close associates of the person who would have disappeared in circumstance of peril. When a matter such as this remains unresolved, persons remain hopeful, and in hope such circumstances can make some delusional, which is not a healthy state of mind to be in. Sometimes the condition worsens with time and age. Madam Speaker, I believe that the state should seek to help our citizens and loved ones of disappeared persons in those circumstances. And this is what this piece of proposed legislation is seeking to do. Madam Speaker, in so doing, we make the presumption that the missing person wishes to remain missing would not want to remain missing. But Madam Speaker, 2 years is a long time to be seeking to find your way back home and cannot. Madam Speaker, apart from the obvious difficulties that can emerge from disappearance of persons in circumstances of peril, there are other difficulties that may not be too obvious. Such a disappearance may have legal ramifications. Madam Speaker, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas was visited by Hurricane Dorian a few years ago, and to date, there are still persons missing and unaccounted for, and their affairs need to be wound up so that their survivors can move on. The healing process has not yet started for some of those survivors. The psychological trauma remains for many. Madam Speaker, I believe the government should do all in its power to assist persons in bringing closure in such circumstances. And we need to assist them in moving on from this and other such tragedies. Because of dire consequences that can emerge in these circumstances, many very important transactions cannot be completed. These can have very negative effect on the person who are dependents of the person who would have disappeared in perilous circumstances, as mentioned. Madam Speaker, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas has an archipelagic geographical construct. This once necessitated Bahamians traversing these beautiful waters in very small sloops that could not possibly pass today's standards. Many of them went missing at sea. And even today, some 93 years later, their status remains missing at sea. Madam Speaker, our folklore is replete with stories of persons who went missing at sea. The iconic song, Run Come See Jerusalem, by the late, great Blind Blake, Alfonso Higgs. And it describes a lost at sea experience where 29 souls or persons traveling from Nassau to Andros on 3 of these rickety boats back in 1929 went missing at sea. I believe we can still remember the names of those 3 sailboats, Madam Speaker. If my memory serves me correct, it would be the Ethel, the Myrtle, and the Pretoria. Madam Speaker, we no longer tell stories like that. The world has changed. And to do something like that may no longer be politically correct. Yet persons disappear in circumstances of peril, and when they do, it leaves a lot of loose ends. It may be that the family member had been fully insured for 10 to 15 years and has disappeared in circumstances of peril. The insurance company is insisting on a death certificate in order to pay out the insurance benefit. The bank is requiring a death certificate along with certain other documents in order to give access to the bank account. The person who disappeared in circumstances of peril may be owed other types of debt, and all of the debtors are requiring proof of debt in order for the debt to be settled. And rightly so, because the person who disappeared suddenly reappears sometime in the distant future, which has reportedly happened before. Madam Speaker, this piece of legislation is a step in the right direction. I'm not sure if the substantive law takes into account the possibility of reappearance of persons presumed to be dead by law, but perhaps this is a matter for a further amendment, because, Madam Speaker, there are some dubious cases where a person disappeared deliberately and do not wish to be found, but that is a subject for another debate. What this bill is seeking to do is necessary, and that necessity was brought sharply into focus with the occurrence of Superstorm Dorian a few years ago. Madam Speaker, Dorian was the most perilous storm in recorded history to have ever visited on the Bahamas. Its ominous presence lingered over the two islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama for almost 2 horrifying days. It will fearfully linger in the hearts of all Bahamians for many years to come. And each hurricane season, we will all be wondering, with a trace of fear, if something akin to Dorian will come again this year. And if it comes, will it come to our island? And if it comes, who will disappear in circumstances of peril? Madam Speaker, we cannot bury our proverbial head in sand and think Dorian was a fluke. With global warming continuing its sinister effects on our world, it is only a matter of time before another circumstance of peril comes and people will disappear. I can vividly recall the tsunami of the South Pacific just a few years ago. It is estimated that over 150,000 people perish. God forbid something like that should ever happen in the Bahamas. When something happens, we must be ready to take appropriate action, Madam Speaker. Life must go on, and we must have the ability to make that happen as flawlessly as possible. We cannot continue business as usual. Transactions that has commenced must continue for the benefit of those who remained after the circumstances of peril have passed. Bills will still have to be paid, and we all know those who have disappeared and therefore absent and non-functioning cannot carry out their obligations. Can you imagine having a home to live in if the mortgage has not been paid for 2 years? This is unimaginable in today's business climate. Investors want a return on their investments, and the insurers will not pay out the insurance premiums, benefits, unless the insured is legally dead. That's the nature of things in today's world. What I have just described are very real and true stories. They happened as a result of Hurricane Dorian. Madam Speaker, we are proposing an amendment to the Evidence Act. This amendment is not a panacea. The law is a living organism. It is evolving and growing. Like life, it is constantly changing, and law must be changeable to fit the needs of evolving societies. We know we cannot allow the Evidence Act to remain as it is, because in its present state, it is inadequate and therefore ineffective in the cases I just described. That being the case, we have a moral obligation to change or amend it. It may be that a mother was paying or about to start paying tuition for a child, and in order to do so, she has applied for a loan jointly with the father. The father, who had taken out an insurance policy, subsequently disappeared in circumstances of peril. As the law presently stands, even if that child does go off to college, or he or she can get a PhD, they still can't access the insurance benefit that was supposed to pay for that tuition. Madam Speaker, not everyone has the same story, and not everyone will be affected by the circumstances I have described. But the Bahamian society living in the geographical construct, the Bahamas will share the circumstances of peril. Such circumstances are not confined to selected groups. Everyone is touched by circumstance when it occurs. Not all of us will disappear, but some of us or one of us might, Madam Speaker. And when this happens, we must be ready. We have recently had such an experience, and with the threat of global warming fermenting all the time, something catastrophic is bound to happen again. And we must be prepared such that when it happens, we have laws in place to deal with the circumstances that we are faced with. We cannot stand around wringing our hands when we are faced with catastrophe. We know the circumstances of peril are coming. Madam Speaker, the Parliament has a constitutional obligation to the citizens of this country. The Constitution mandates Parliament to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And this mandate is particularly relevant when we have so many citizens who are not in a financial position to take care of themselves. Many of our citizens are barred from the halls of justice because they do not have resources to apply for the justice they are entitled to. It is not an easy fix, Madam Speaker, but whenever chance come upon a situation that demands our Parliament attention, we are not going to betray our constitutional responsibility. Sure. Where justice requires it, we will repeal a law. And when justice requires it, we will create new law. This legislative exercise we are undertaking here today is not merely a simple matter of amending the Evidence Act to deal with this situation. Madam Speaker, we are seeking to address a broader theme of justice. Parliament always must be engaged. Some of the situations I described just a few minutes ago are situations where justice cries out for an equitable remedy to some of the circumstances that are created purely by chance. It's no one's fault that Dorian came to the Bahamas and did what it did, but it happened. No one can guarantee that it will not happen again. But when the unpredictable happen and the weaknesses and voids in our legal framework are exposed, the strong will survive, but the weak will perish. The insurance company will not pay if it does not have a legal obligation to do so. Madam Speaker, with this amendment to the Evidence Act, the survivors will be able to produce a legal document that says the person is dead in circumstances where they disappeared in peril, circumstances of peril. They will be legally entitled to get what is rightfully theirs. So, Madam Speaker, I take delight in moving this amendment to the Evidence Act. We are doing it because it is the right thing to do. We will not shirk our responsibility just because a necessary law may happen to be unpopular. We'll do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Madam Speaker, this proposed amendment is not a panacea. It will not fix all of the problems where persons disappear in circumstances of peril. No law does that. A nation's law is a living organism. We will strengthen the laws where the weaknesses appear. Each of the laws that make up our statute laws was passed for a purpose. And when it was passed, it made good sense to the Parliament at that time. But, Madam Speaker, you would realize that between 80 to 85% of bills brought to this Parliament are not new laws at all. Rather, they are amendments to old existing laws. This is what we do, Madam Speaker. Parliament is in the maintenance business. Parliament maintains our existing laws. And so, Madam Speaker, we will continue to do our best and to keep up with the needs of this country that we all love. We will continue to seek to improve our legal apparatus. We will continue to pursue justice for all of our citizens, and where the law is not sharp enough, we will employ that branch of justice to deal with equity. But however we have to do it, we will endeavor to legislate for a happier society. Madam Speaker, I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
If I may be so presumptuous, I would like to wish the entire Bahamas a happy independence, and in particular those residents of the Pinewood constituency.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central and South Abaco.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to second the amendment to this evidence bill. This is few in words, but great in impact. Before I do so, I'd like to say that I am humbly honored to stand here and speak on behalf of Central and South Abaco. And I would like to speak to them on a few matters at hand. You know, Madam Speaker, summertime is officially here. The start of the Goombay Festival and our independence celebrations. A special thank you to all those who worked to make the Goombay Festival in Abaco a success. Be proud to be Bahamian and celebrate our 49th year of independence this weekend. I'll be out there at Dundastown Park on Friday night to bring it in our independence. Be safe and have fun. Madam Speaker, as the Atlantic Basin increases with storm activity, I would like everyone to be aware that we are in the midst of our annual hurricane season. I encourage everyone to be prepared to do what is needed before any storm may come our way. Prepare early and stock up on essentials before any storm is being tracked. I encourage the local government to assist the community at the local government level in preparing the streets that are often flooded, helping the elderly, and doing what's right for the people that put you there. Be vigilant, be prepared, be resilient. Hurricane season is upon us. And this is, Madam Speaker, this is, I'm reminded of this because of this bill has such implications for storms such as these, perilous natural disasters. This amendment to this evidence bill is very important. It is far-reaching implications. Although only a few words, it has immense and deep impact on the lives of those who have been hurt by the recent natural disaster Dorian, and it has implications for any upcoming natural disaster, God forbid it. It is a matter of emotional and legal closure. It is a matter of lessening the burden of having to move on without the loved one with you. This is especially the case for those who may not have a body to put in a grave, to give a funeral, or to offer final resting spot. Obtaining a legal certificate of death will be something concrete in their hands, bringing forth some small emotional closure, but bringing forth a path to move forward. Having a death certificate for a loved one may be a straightforward process normally, but after a natural disaster can prove challenging. Without a body, families normally wait years, sometimes decades, to obtain such certificate. Insurance companies take 7+ years before you can do so. In the case where few were able to get this certificate in short time, the constant traveling back and forth to the city from the family islands, having legal advisement and so on and so forth, is not only a financial burden, a time burden, but it prolongs the agony brought forth by such a loss. I adamantly express that this is an important legal matter and an important document for families moving forward in many aspects. One of these many aspects is financial closure. There are many deceased that were the primaries on mortgages, on life insurances, on bank accounts, on utilities, on legal contracts, et cetera, et cetera. These cannot be moved forward without a simple document. Many spouses or children of those deceased are unable to move to go forward with their lives due to legal constraints. Without a death certificate, the surviving members are unable to make life insurance claims. They're unable to access bank accounts. They're unable to get deeds on their land or move forward with mortgages. With this documentation, they are then legally able to move forward. And moving forward is what these few words in this amendment is all about. It is about giving a bit of relief and a bit of an easier path to such a hard and life-changing activity. Not only are these grieving survivors unable to move forward emotionally or financially without a death certificate, but the process has been tolling and causing further strife, agony to already struggling individuals. Many people during Hurricane Dorian lost everything. I was one of those people, but I was blessed not to lose a loved one. There are many who have lost many loved ones, many friends. And these few words, this little amendment has far-reaching implications. Getting a death certificate on the Family Islands, as I have spoken about, coming back and forth to Nassau, securing these documents, several attempts to get closure on a matter that is normally a step-by-step process, easy process. Many Family Islanders after natural disaster cannot afford these trips, cannot afford the time, they cannot afford the emotional anguish that is associated with this. Madam Speaker, this bill reduces the amount of years to declare someone lost or deceased. In particular, down to 2 years or more, when, as I've stated, many insurance companies are 7+ years, decades without closure. The reduction in years will aid grieving families and facilitate obtaining a death certificate much sooner. Madam Speaker, I speak directly to all grieving survivors, especially those from Dorian, in Abaco and Grand Bahama. I sympathize with you, and I cannot fathom your grief, your agony, and the struggles throughout this ordeal. We all went through Dorian together. We all have had our struggles together to rebuild and move forward, but to lose a loved one is a struggle in its own level. All Dorian survivors together grieve and sympathize with you. Those people that have lost, those people that are still struggling, and those people that these few words will mean so much. As it was pointed out, laws are fluid, laws are meant to be adjusted, and laws should be reactive to the time at hand. With the increasing climate change, this is not a one-off deal. Dorian is not the last that we'll see, although I hope it is. But we must be prepared, and we must be vigilant on how we work as a unit to bring forward this country. This bill will aid not only Dorian victims, families suffering, but those who, God forbid, any future natural disaster affects, that they do not have to go through the added stress, the agony to obtain a certificate and some sort of closure. Madam Speaker, I am short with my words, but deep in meaning. This amendment to the evidence bill is more than an adjustment to a law. This is a way for many families to move forward. Many families that had to go forward and see their loved ones washed away and know personally that they are gone and still have to fight for such simple legal documents to move forward. I am thankful for this Davis administration on their thoughtfulness on the survivors of Dorian throughout many of these amendments that we're doing, but particularly on this bill that we speak of today. I am Central and South Abaco wholeheartedly supports this bill, supports this amendment, and this change to bring closure to many families and many people that have lost loved ones. God bless my fellow Abaconians, and God bless the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril. As many? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to first, before I get into my substantive presentation, to offer our condolences to two of my learned friends, two of my constituents, two attorneys who have been a powerful force on the island of Grand Bahama and have made a significant contribution to the legal fraternity in the Bahamas. The first is Stephen Wilshcombe, who I've known for many, many years, who held practice in Grand Bahama, and who we pray for his family, pray for his children, pray that God would be with them during this time of need. We also remember the family of Jethro Miller, who passed away suddenly. And we also remember his family and pray for his family as well. I think just about many of the members of Parliament, as well as the Member of Parliament for Western Bimini joined us at both of those funeral services. Madam Speaker, it again is a privilege to speak in this honorable place on behalf of the resilient and courageous and strong people of East Grand Bahama. I want to send a special hello to the people obviously in Sweetens Key, in McLeanstown, and Pelican Point, High Rock, Rocky Creek, and Freetown, Gambia Point. I want to send a special hello to Ms. Hazel Ballou, one of the strong mothers in East Grand Bahama. And Madam Speaker, I am sure that throughout the Bahamas, throughout your constituency, throughout all of our constituencies, there are these short, small, but powerful mothers who have a way of just speaking life into your life. And I had the opportunity to speak with her on Saturday, and she just reminded me of my grandmother, was able to just speak life into you and speak a word into you at the right time. And so I want to say a special hello to Ms. Hazel. Madam Speaker, for me, and for those of us who lived through the most intense hurricane of our lifetime to hit the Bahamas, it is always emotional. This storm brings back many memories. The intense preparation for the storm, the many press briefings about the intensity and the warnings to evacuate, the preparation of shelters and rescue vehicles, and all the preparations, no one anticipated what was to come. I recall when photos of Abaco started to come into Grand Bahama, and we saw what was coming our way. I managed to get a call into Darren Henfield, who, thank God, had some military training and saved numerous lives. He said to me, in the way that, the military way that he speaks, my brother, this is bad. I recall the police and Peter Turnquest going door to door throughout the East Grand Bahama communities to speak to people. We intensified our efforts in the press, the radio, and the social media. First, I remember the stories of Bahamian heroism. The workers at the command center who didn't know where their families were and didn't know the state of their families, but continued to serve with courageous strength. Madam Speaker, the hospital workers who were flooded out and moved sick patients in the middle of a Category 5 storm. I recall having conversations with the hospital administrator who you could tell in her voice the tragic situation that was happening at the hospital. But there was still a strength that she and the doctors and the nurses who were on call maintained. Madam Speaker, I recall having a conversation about 3 a.m. with my colleague, the leader, Michael Pintard, who, in the middle of the storm and in his own challenges, was seeking to find out how others were doing. The many calls of distress and those who went out to first rescue persons. And I believe I told this story before, but on the day after the storm, that first morning that we were able to get outside, and when we took rescue vehicles on the bridge, the Casuarina Bridge, and when we looked off the Casuarina Bridge, and the only thing that we could see was the tops of roofs and the tops of trees. And in the midst of what I believe was still tropical storm or hurricane force winds, those courageous men who took the jet skis, I watched them first go out. And they were shaky when they went out. And they spun around and came back. And they didn't just stop, but they took a rope and tied themselves together on the jet skis to ensure that no one was going to be left behind. And they went out and started and did not stop until all the persons who needed to be rescued were rescued.
Yeah, these Bahamians, right?
I salute every one of those courageous persons. Madam Speaker, I remember the lives lost. Madam Speaker, on my way from the Casuarina Bridge, when we left the rescuers on their way, I remember getting a call from Jason Albury. And Jason said to me, "Minister, please send more police. We are now recovering bodies." And that, Madam Speaker, was, I believe, the worst moment for me during Hurricane Dorian. In Grand Bahama and Abaco, there were many who lost their lives. In East Grand Bahama, we suffered great loss of life. One of my very own campaign generals lost her sister, her nephew, and her niece. Families lost husbands and children. Some lost husband and wife together. Some lost children and grandchildren all at the same time. As was said by the member for Pinewood and the member for Central and South Abaco, our hearts go out to all those who suffered loss. And our prayers continue to go to those who lost loved ones. For many of them, the pain is still fresh. The pain is still real. And even talking about it is still difficult for many. In my preparation for the debate, I spoke to a few of them who are still in the process of going through getting death certificates. And I spoke and asked them about their perspective on what we are doing here today. You know, death struck us all. Either a family or a friend. I believe everyone, especially in East Grand Bahama, was affected. In the East, we are close. Families are connected, are all connected somehow. For me, I approached this debate with a very sober thought. Having those who lost loved ones at the center of our attention. This is a difficult debate and a difficult topic. In particular, it is difficult for those who I represent. In addition to the catastrophic damage to the infrastructure, buildings, and homes, never have we lost so many lives. Everything about this storm required us to confront situations and challenges to which the Bahamas did not have a playbook. Let's look at the particular amendment that we have before us and the legal situation as I understand it. Having the benefit of speaking with a former coroner, present magistrates, some families, and also a former attorney general. At present, if someone goes missing during a situation of peril, and we'll use, for example, a hurricane, and we will come to the definition of peril later on in my presentation. But at present, the coroner's court has jurisdiction after an inquiry or inquest is made to make a finding that a person missing in those circumstances is in fact dead and the death resulted from that storm. So at present, the coroner's court has jurisdiction to deal with these Dorian-like circumstances. This enables the person to obtain a death certificate once the coroner makes their ruling. It is also my understanding that there is no limitation as to the timing of this jurisdiction, meaning the coroner could deal with the matters 1 month after a peril, 6 months after a peril, 2 years after a peril, or even 10 years after a peril. The coroner has jurisdiction to deal with these circumstances, regardless, as I understand it, to the timing of things. It is my understanding that matters are only brought to the coroner's court after an investigation is done by the police. One of the coroners informed me that even if persons bring a matter to the coroner's court on their own individually, they are referred to the police. The police then investigates, presents a file, and then that file then goes to the coroner's court for the court to deal with it. Once there's an investigation, the matter can be then referred to the coroner's court. This obviously would make sense because the coroner acts on evidence produced, and the police's role is to marshal the evidence and then present that evidence. Therefore, in law, these matters could be dealt with by the coroner at any time once the police has marshaled the evidence and presented these matters to the coroner's court. Many of these matters have already been dealt with in New Providence, where there was a coroner's inquest for a number of Dorian victims, persons who went missing, persons whose bodies were never found. They went to the coroner's court. The coroner made a ruling and those persons were able to receive some of their death certificates. I don't have the date when it happened. I can get it for you, but I spoke to the coroner herself, who made those rulings and who made, as a result of those rulings, persons were able to obtain their death certificates.
That was done even by the former coroner, Weish.
Ms. Weish. I also spoke to the present magistrate in Grand Bahama, who just recently completed one of these matters as it relates to families in East Grand Bahama, and are continuing that process of going through these inquests in order to make the necessary rulings. One family, as I said, recently completed by the magistrate court in Grand Bahama, and was able then, as a result, was able then to get their death certificate. The question, though, Madam Speaker, that we must take into account is why has it taken the time in order for these matters to be brought before the coroner's court in order for an order to be made? And we make no accusation, no assumption, and I'm sure that the police have their own challenges and had their own challenges in terms of these investigations. Some investigations were complex, some investigations were vast, some investigations were not simple. So we understand the situation that the police were presented with. In my conversations with the magistrates, they confirmed that they dealt with matters as they were referred to them. The ironic thing is that as we seek to change the presumption of death from basically 7 years to 2 years in circumstances of peril, the magistrates did not use the presumption in their determination. How could they? Because at the time, the presumption was 7 years. So 7 years had not passed as yet. The magistrates hear the evidence and they make a determination. The magistrates called witnesses, spoke to, presented evidence by the police, presented evidence by family members, and the coroner then made a determination, or the jury in the coroner's court then made a determination. There was no presumption used. How does the amendment make it easier for those who are confronted with this challenge? This amendment only deals with the evidential burden in those matters. It does not deal with the procedure on how you make the determination. So, for example, and we support this. This is an important amendment. But it speaks to the evidential burden of what needs to be proved when you get to the court. But it doesn't speak to how you get to the court and in what procedure you get to the court. The coroner's inquest or the coroner's court is one pathway to get to you the death certificates that you need to get, or for the court to make an order, and then you are able to get there. But this doesn't move us in terms of getting to the coroner's court any quicker. But it does move us in terms of getting to the civil side or the Supreme Court, I believe, quicker. And I'll speak to that also.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
This is on a point of order. The honourable member for East Grand Bahama should have reference to the Coroner's Act. And also Section 33 of the Act says governing principles of inquest. And at subsection A, it says, the coroner court is not bound by rules of evidence and may inform itself on any matter as it thinks fit. So what is before us, Madam Speaker, is a provision of the rules of evidence. And by statute of this honorable parliament, the rules of evidence really do not apply
To the coroner's court.
and do not govern the conduct of the coroner's inquest.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
You know, I
East Grand Bahama.
Madam Speaker, I want to genuinely thank the member for Fort Charlotte, who I respect greatly, and who I respect in terms of being a very good lawyer, and has actually stated the same thing that I stated, which is that what we are doing here today, the presumption was not used in the coroner's court. So he actually is assisting me and is showing the provision that confirms what I said. So I genuinely thank him for confirming and for actually providing the necessary act to support what I'm saying. Madam Speaker, my question is, in addition to doing what we are doing, in addition to reducing the time that the evidential burden, in addition to reducing the 7 years to 2 years, shouldn't we also be dealing with the process as to how we get to the coroner's court? So, for example, we should be looking at things like, does every matter in these kinds of circumstances require a coroner? Shouldn't we also be looking at whether in these circumstances a matter like this could be dealt with by a magistrate? Now, I know it's a simple process, I believe, for a magistrate to be deemed a coroner or appointed a coroner, and then they then would have all the powers and authorities of a coroner. In the coroner's inquest, there needs to be a jury. A jury has to be impaneled. I know in Grand Bahama, that was one of the points that was raised by the magistrate, that a jury has to be impaneled in order for these things to be dealt with. In these circumstances where we are attempting to make it easier for people, because there's one thing that we all are aligned with. We all seek to understand the circumstances that those loved ones are facing. And we all seek to make the situation easier and better for them. And that's why I said my approach to this, that's why I went through the introduction that I went through. My approach to this is that we all should be looking at, not ourselves, but looking at how do we make it better? And I hope and I pray that the words that I am speaking today is taken in that spirit, that we look at ways really genuinely to make it better. So we ask the questions like, does it need to take a year, 2 years, in order for these matters to be brought to the coroner's court, for the coroner's court to deal with these things? The next question is, the law speaks to 2 years. And I seek to understand the reasoning and the rationale for 2 years, as opposed to 1 year, or as opposed to 3 years. Where did we land, and how do we land and get to the 2 year period? In the circumstances where a person has disappeared and there is clear evidence that the person has disappeared. So, for example, there were circumstances where person said, I saw my loved one washed out to sea. I saw them where they were no longer with us. Should they have to wait 2 years? Why not 6 months? Why not a time frame that it takes to do a proper investigation, and then once a proper investigation is done, then they are able to apply, as opposed to having a strict 2-year period? Because even as your member said on the government side, even 2 years is a long period of time for persons to wait for a death certificate in these kinds of circumstances. I also looked at the Ontario, Canada legislation, and it appears as though it may have been fashioned after another jurisdiction, but the Ontario legislation seems to be very close to what this is. And they said that they did it after 9/11, that there were many persons who they had to deal with who they could not find their bodies and who died in peril. And they put in place a special provision that, and because they are similar to us in that they had a 7-year they had a 7-year presumption. And they put this in place saying that before the 7 years, if a person died in circumstances of peril, then you could apply to the court in order for the court to then make the order. They didn't put a time period. They just said before 7 years. So again, we have no objection to the 2 years, but my question is, why 2 years? And how did we land on 2 years? And whether in circumstances that if I can show and I can prove, shouldn't I be able to do it at an earlier period of time? The other question is, we have not defined peril. We have said what peril includes. We've said peril includes hurricane, but we have not defined it. And the member for Pinewood spoke about persons who go out missing, go out fishing, go out missing, and so on. And so the question is, how open and how far is the definition of peril going to be? Would it include someone who dies in a fire? Would it include someone who dies in a plane crash? Would it include someone who dies in a shipwreck? Would it include someone who dies as a result of weather, not a hurricane, but just weather, bad weather on a fishing trip? Would it include those kinds of circumstances? And obviously it means that the court will have to define this, but do we as legislators want to put some clearer parameters on what we intend this provision to deal with and how we intend this provision to deal with? So those are, I think, some of the questions that we have. We commend the government for making progress to help this situation. But we believe that a more holistic approach should be taken when it comes to dealing with this. And as the member for Pinewood said, this is not intended to fix all problems. We understand that. Another question that I have also is that, and I recall in my practice years ago, having a similar circumstance where we applied to the Supreme Court and used the presumption in the Supreme Court. So we had to make a Supreme Court application, use the presumption, the Supreme Court made a declaration, the person was then able to get their death certificate. In circumstances like this, where someone dies, and again, I keep coming back to Dorian, in circumstances where somebody goes missing in a Dorian-like circumstance, why would we not make it a magistrate court application as opposed to a Supreme Court application. I understand. I understand. I understand. I understand. I understand. I understand. But my question, and again, this is not intended, and I go back to my first original point. I go back to my first original point. This isn't about us. This is about how do we make the circumstance better for those persons in those circumstances like Dory. That's all. And my question and again suggestion would be, if the coroner already deals with these kinds of matters, and the coroner is on the coroner has already dealt with these matters.
That's what they have done. What they've done. Look at the atmosphere. What they are doing.
Prime Minister, if that is the case, all I'm saying is the coroner has already made certain decisions. If the coroner had already done so, and the coroner is still in the process of doing more, if the coroner is still in the process of doing more, then my, again, suggestion would be, right now, the Supreme Court has jurisdiction to deal with this presumption of 7 years. If the coroner can deal with or has dealt with circumstances where persons go missing and so on, couldn't we also allow, in these kinds of circumstances, allow a magistrate to deal with these kinds of matters? A magistrate obviously would be, in my view, quicker. It would most certainly be cheaper and more accessible to the ordinary person in terms of being able to deal with the circumstances. And a coroner already deals with these kinds of matters. So as opposed to leaving it with the Supreme Court, let's see if we could look at giving the magistrate the jurisdiction to deal with situations of peril in your 2-year amendment. So in your 2-year amendment, allow the magistrate to be able to hear the evidence, the same evidence that a Supreme Court judge would have heard, but allow the magistrate to be able to hear it. It then would allow the process to go through a bit quicker, and it would allow the process to go through a bit less expensive for the persons to be able to deal with it.
Madam Speaker,
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Charlotte.
The Evidence Act is not only applied by a court, it is referred to in decision-making by insurance companies. For example, an insurance company, if a claim were made on a life insurance, you would present the insurance company with certain evidence to establish the fact of death. That would be a death certificate. The person would have had to have been pronounced dead. You would have to have a death certificate prepared, and the insurance company, without having to go to court, unless there is an issue of a will or person died interstate. But if you have a designated beneficiary, all you'd have to show is the fact of death, evidenced by a death certificate. Now, the insurance company, in a situation where the facts around the death cannot be established by a death certificate, the insurance company will have to ask that there be a period, their presumptions will come into play of 7 years. And that period of 7 years would have had to elapse from the period when the person in circumstances of peril. Here, this is reducing and that period, not for coroners, not for the Supreme Court, or not only for the magistrate court. It's a law of presumption where an insurance company can say, okay, 2 years have passed, and based on this provision of the Evidence Act, we will apply the presumption and we will grant without having to put the person through a judicial process. And in a coroner's court, as you know, it's a sudden death. Normally there's a body, so there's the inquest about the cause of death and so on. In these kinds of circumstances, there may not be a body.
And you have to report that. You can't report. All they can do is report that somebody's missing. You can't report that the person is dead.
Right. So the presumption gives the claimant, the citizen, the opportunity to have closure without necessarily going through a judicial process. And if it is in a judicial process, a presumption that a court can also use.
Saying that an insurance company can make that determination without having a death certificate and can rely on only the presumptions. No difficulty with that. And that's again why we support what you are doing. We support the fact that you are reducing the time period from 7 to 2. We support that.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Carolina.
I'm happy to hear that you are supporting this intervention, which will bring a lot of relief to a number of persons. But I say to you that this concept that the coroner's court could deal with it, and they may have been dealing with, is fallacy. Let me say, if you look at the Act, the Coroner's Act, first of all, and it was, don't forget now, the new Coroner's Act was passed under your watch in 2011, which sort of modernized the whole concept of coroner's role and where the inquiry goes. So what a coroner is only in jurisdiction is only engaged when you report a death. So you have to report the death. Now, in the circumstances of a peril, how are you going to report a death? All you'll be reporting is, look, me and my family were together. We've had this Dorian catastrophe. We were separated. I went this way and I went the next way, right? And so all I'm doing is reporting my family as being missing, because since then I have not seen them. I've not heard from them. That's where the presumption comes in. That's why when you look at the present law that speaks to 7 years, it speaks of having not heard of them for 7 years. So the only thing you can do is report a missing person, but you can't report a death. And the coroner's jurisdiction is only triggered when you report that someone has died. So you just look at, that's what the Act says. And you see, and just as your former Attorney General indicated to the press when he's responding to my request to do this very act, right? He was saying the same thing, that the coroners could do it. The coroner could do it. And he also went as far as to make light of the situation. And I will refer to that. I don't have the article here. When he says, look, they may have gone out to sea and someone may have rescued them and just not brought them back. So let's wait for that. See, and I'll refer to this. Now, just so that completeness, right? Right? It's the jurisdictions. You want me to read this or you'll just take it? Finish it. Yeah, you finish it. See, you got to report to that.
I would like to complete my 4 minutes, but to the Prime Minister's point, and I think we have to, I suppose, be mindful of the fact that there have already been some coroner's inquests, and I'm not, Prime Minister, I'm not arguing, Madam Speaker, through you to the Prime Minister, I'm not arguing that the coroner's inquest or the coroner is the right or wrong jurisdiction. I'm not arguing that, because I haven't even looked at the extent to which the coroner has jurisdiction. The point that I am raising is the coroner has already dealt with some matters, and the coroner is in the process of dealing with some matters. And so that what you have just raised opens up even a bigger question for those persons who have already gotten death certificates based on the coroner's inquest. So I don't know if
Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
I think the confusion, Madam Speaker, is that the cases in Grand Bahama, where the coroner has been,
these are not circumstances where I asked that question. These are not questions where there were bodies. These were questions where there were no bodies and they needed death certificates in those circumstances. So that's why I say we may have, if the Prime Minister is indeed correct in his assessment, we may have a bigger problem in that you already have.
2 years have gone.
Well, then you may be able to solve it in that manner. You see.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
The point is, the coroner is basically relieved of what this parliament, in other words, this parliament is setting the standard of what presumption, in other words, in the absence of facts that the person is dead, as is normally established by a death certificate or the existence of a body, and then you go to the coroner's court, and you ask for an inquest. We have the body, or the body may have even been buried, and you ask for the exhumation of the body in order to ascertain through scientific means the cause of the death. Here, the parliament is doing what parliaments have done across the world, and that is to establish a presumption which helps the coroner, which helps the insurance company, which helps the Supreme Court, or in any other context. Well, the coroner can have, unlike the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal, or the Magistrate Court, where you have to follow the rules of evidence, the coroner can take judicial notice of the rules of evidence. It has more flexibility, the same way the industrial tribunal. In other words, to take a common sense, practical approach.
Thank you, honourable member. East Grand Bahama.
As I said, the issue we have to look at and have to address is, if what the Prime Minister is saying is correct, how do we deal with those? And then I say that as attorneys, I say that as attorneys, not with any disrespect, not with any disrespect, I say that. But as I conclude, Madam Speaker, as I conclude, I want to go back to where I originally started off at, which is saying that we must be focused on how do we make...
Honourable Member, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. How do we make this better for those persons who went through this situation? We have to look at the law and look at how we are bound by the law, but we also have to look at how we need to change the law in order to make the situation better for those persons who are dealing with it. One suggestion would be, let us look at a less period than 2 years, because there are circumstances that would be clear, and you may not require to wait for a 2-year period, but the court can then look at that evidence and then can make a determination in a lesser period of time than 2 years. And the second thing is, let us look at the magistrate court and giving the magistrate the jurisdiction to deal with these kinds of circumstances where it would be quicker, it would be less expensive. The magistrate then can deal with these things without someone having to go through hiring a lawyer and so on. If the magistrates are capable, the magistrates are quite capable of dealing with these type matters. So we as legislative could give the jurisdiction to, we as legislators could give the jurisdiction of these kinds of matters to the magistrate. The question, Madam Speaker, also, and I have to again remind the government, I know that the member for Pinewood is working on this. I know that the DRA is working on this, but I must again continue to remind the government about those persons who are still in need for those the home repair circumstances. I did have a conversation with the head of the DRA who said to me that they are presently working on it. But again, we just want to keep that in the forefront of your mind, because every time we go through our constituencies, they keep it at the forefront of our minds. So we want to make sure keep it at the forefront of your minds. I'd also like to ask whether or not we are going to continue with the VAT-free holiday for the hurricane supplies.
Honourable Member.
We had thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and also whether or not we are going to continue the back to school VAT-free holiday as well. Madam Speaker, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Pinewood.
Speaker, I'd just like to address the point raised by the member for East Grand Bahama with regards to DRA. The management team is presently in Abaco as we speak. And with regards to payments, I know he would have done what he usually does. So did Central Grand Bahama and Marcos City on behalf of residents from Grand Bahama. Those matters will be addressed shortly, Madam Speaker. We have the funds. We're just ironing out some kinks, and shortly, very soon, we'll report that that process would have started. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for North Abaco.
Madam Speaker, today I'm truly thankful to Almighty God for the opportunity that I have been given to be a voice for the people of North Abaco. I am also grateful to the people of North Abaco that have placed their confidence in me to represent them. Madam Speaker, I wish to extend the sincere and deep condolences to Shana Aunt Will, the father and mother of a beautiful, very young, talented lady in Dunderstown who lost her life in a horrific car accident some 2 weeks ago, a few days after graduating high school. I also wish to extend and acknowledge your grandmother, Lavoine Maynard, who was like my grandmother as well. I wish to extend my condolences to the entire family on such a tragic loss. Like my colleagues, I wish to congratulate the retiring Commissioner of Police, Mr. Roll, and congratulate the newly appointed Mr. Fernanda. As my colleague from South and Central Abaco indicated, there are many events that are going to be held in Abaco in the next few days to celebrate our 49th independence, a few of which I also will be in attendance. I would also like to echo his sentiments after the experience of Hurricane Dorian to urge my fellow Abaconians to prepare themselves for the hurricane season that is upon us. It's best to be prepared and don't need it, and to be prepared and don't have it. Madam Speaker, September 1st, 2022 will mark the 3rd anniversary of the devastating event that shook the Northern Bahamas, namely Abaco and Grand Bahama, to its core. This monster storm destroyed homes and businesses, displaced many families, destroyed livelihoods, and yes, Dorian took many lives. Countless families were left to mourn the loss of their family members. Children were lost, mothers were lost, and fathers was lost.
Members?
Imagine losing everything and mourning at the same time. It is a painstaking experience that no one should have to live through. Yet, we move on and we move forward. I admire the strength and resilience of the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama. Every day, we work diligently to put together the pieces of our lives. But imagine that you are trying to rebuild and restore order in your life, and there standing in front of you is a law that prevents you from bringing finality to your loss. Imagine that this law prevents you from taking important steps to do what is necessary to rebuild, like claim insurance, access bank accounts, claim property and inheritance. In the Bahamas, it is the Evidence Act, Chapter 65, Section 93, states, where any person is proved not to have been heard of for 7 years after proper inquiry made by or on behalf of those who naturally would have heard of him if he had been alive. The court shall presume until the contrary is shown that he is dead, but the court in such case shall make no presumption as to the time of his death. And the burden of proof that he died any particular time shall be on the person who asserts. 7 years. 7 years is a long time to wait to obtain a death certificate for a loved one that you know has been lost. This will delay insurance claims, hinder banking transactions, and the probate process. Today, I am proud to be a part of an administration that cares about people, are empathetic to the suffering of Bahamians, and are willing to apply a common sense approach that would make the life of Bahamians better. This Davis-led administration is not about talk. I repeat it. This Davis-led administration is not about talk. But we are willing to act in the best interest of Bahamians and to do what is necessary to improve the lives of the people of the Bahamas. Today, we seek to amend the Evidence Act to insert 93A into Chapter 65, which will provide the presumption of death where a person disappears in circumstances of perils and has not been heard of or from for a period of 2 years or more. Madam Speaker, this is good news for Keva Bastian of Dunderstown, Abaco, who lost a 28-year-old son, Kalen McIntosh, during Hurricane Dorian. Ms. Bastian, even though her son's body was found, was never given his remains, to give her son a proper funeral. She has not been able to claim insurance nor access Kalen's bank account. Madam Speaker, this is good news for Clarice Swain, who lost her son Malik Moultrie during this storm. She is still awaiting the death certificate so that she can move forward. Madam Speaker, the list goes on. And it's extremely heart-wrenching. These names I call isn't names I just decided to enlist as persons whom my team would have sat with, whom I would have sat with before and heard their stories. How their loved one would have placed them in a safe place, only to turn around and attempt to save others, watch them swim away and never seeing them again. It's heart-wrenching to believe that your son, after reaching safety, would leave your side to go rescue someone and never return. Holding the hands of your son and your daughter, I can't muster the strength to continue to squeeze the grip on their hands. I have to stand there and watch them wash out of your hands. It's the stories that fathers are telling me in Abaco today. This is good news for the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama who are trying to rebuild their lives after Hurricane Dorian. This is good news for all Bahamians because the reality is we are all at risk for more severe weather occurrences and natural disasters as a result of climate change. Our ability to bounce back and rebuild is greatly impacted by our willingness to examine and amend laws like the Evidence Act to suit the times. Madam Speaker, while I stand here and believe that there is no act, there is no law that this Davis-led administration can enact that will stop the pain that those family members are enduring, I call there's a great need for psychological healing, for help today. As I speak with many persons, the need is still great. Being mindful of that, though, I am extremely proud, and I want to take this moment to express that. To be a part of an administration led by Mr. Davis as the leader, deputy leader, Mr. Cooper, who deemed it necessary not to only talk, but to actually do. To amend laws, to be approached by family members and persons in this Commonwealth of the Bahamas who has real life issues. Many of my constituents says to me, finally, Kirk, it's an honor to finally have a member of parliament that we can actually approach. I'm old enough to know that every person approach me won't be telling me the truth. I say that to say that their interpretation of being able to approach someone might differ from mine, or maybe the opposition one, or even the former member of parliament. Because I believe that all of us should be approachable. Somebody should be able to say something to all of us. But I think the way you respond to them determines whether they feel like you're approachable or not. And I find it that my constituents are kind, caring people. They only want a part of what is theirs, this country. They want to be able to live, thrive in this country and be respected.
Yes.
And I stand here honored to be a part of this administration. While we realize that we won't be able to stop the pain that you are suffering, however, we realize that we have the authority and the power in this place to make laws that can remove every stumbling block, hinder every success you seek. And I am proud that this bill seeks to do just that. Might not be exactly what is needed, but it is the beginning of addressing all that is needed. And I am proud to be a part of it. Lord Aboko, stand in support of the bill, Madam Speaker. God bless you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Foxhill.
Speaker, thank you. I just wanted to clarify a point that had arisen during the contribution of the Honourable Member of East Grand Bahama. And I would like to refer to an article in the Nassau Guardian of May 21st,
He provided that to us too.
and in the article, which I understand would have been supplied by the Honourable Member, the inquest that he referred to in Grand Bahama of 22 bodies that had been recovered, and they could not be identified. I mean, in Abaco, I'm sorry, in Abaco, they could not be identified, and through the process of DNA matching, the coroner was able to identify some of the bodies. But in each of those 22 cases, a body was there to be examined forensically, and a determination was made of which body related to which person, as opposed to someone being washed out to sea and no body to be forensically examined and matched with a presumed missing family member.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for East Grand Bahama.
And thank you very much. And I rise just to respond in terms of a clarification of something that was said in my communication. We don't need to go back and forward in this. My information comes from not the article. My information comes from the court that dealt with the matter and the courts that are presently dealing with matters. And the information that I got from the court was that it dealt with matters. In addition to dealing with matters where bodies were found, it dealt with matters where bodies were never found. And so that's why I raised that question. So again, as I said, I was referring to not what I sent you. I sent you it as an example, but I was referring to the information that I personally received from the court. And the court indicated that they dealt with matters where bodies were there and where there were no bodies. And so that's why I said there are circumstances where, and again, this matter may need to be looked at from the governments in terms of what is now going to happen to those orders that were made in those type circumstances. That's what.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, honorable members of this House, constituents at St. Anne's that are here in the House and those that are at home. I rise today to provide my contribution to this debate, and I don't have a great deal to add. A few observations from the member from East Grand Bahamas' contribution and the amount of time that the member for Fort Charlotte and Cal and Rumkey spent in such close proximity reviewing the Coroner's Act. It was clear to me that the executive branch doesn't necessarily know in each instance what the judicial branch is doing. And that is, in fact, a positive, Madam Speaker, because these are two branches of government that are separate and distinct from one another. And it goes directly to the point of the current Chief Justice Brian Marie's request and disappointment in the lack of passing the court services bill in this honorable House to date. I think that what I've seen today is a clear example that we should relieve ourselves of the confusion as to what we're doing in the executive and legislative branch and what they're doing in the judicial branch, and we should move maybe in the next sitting to pass the Court Services Act. Madam Speaker, I also noted that the member from North Abaco, in my opinion, did an excellent job in summarizing this piece of legislation that we're presently debating, and that is that it's not perfect in that it doesn't go everywhere it needs to address everything it needs to address. It has addressed a need of the people of the Bahamas right now. And for that reason, Madam Speaker, in agreeing with him on that, I'm in support of this bill. I adopt the points made by the member from East Grand Bahama, particularly that consideration should have been given to the period not being 2 years, which coincidentally is the same length of time that a spouse can disappear down the road and abandon their family. Yeah, but the 2-year period is the same amount of time that a spouse can disappear down the road and desert their family before the other spouse can take them to court and have a legitimate grounds for divorce. Today, right now, 2-year period is perfect timing for people in Dorian because they've suffered long enough. A 2-year period, Madam Speaker, is a good length of time for the people that lost family members during Dorian, because 2 years has lapsed. We're approaching 3 years in August of this year. But for those families that may be devastated by the next catastrophic event in the Bahamas, that lose family members by an act of peril, force majeure, whatever it may be, Madam Speaker, 2 years for them to wait is going to be too long. And whichever administration, whichever government, whether it's on the governing side or on the opposition side, is going to be faced with the reality that the people can take it no more, that they have to wait another 2 years before they can get their death certificate through the court system, before they can apply for that insurance payment. Now I see the member from Exuma and Ragged Island wagging his finger at my opposition side. And I do in fact have a question, because even under this 2-year period right now, is it that those families that have lost a loved one, whose family member has disappeared by peril, if they had a life insurance policy in place, let's say in this case, at the time of Dorian, would they have had to continue to make the life insurance payments up to today? And if they've had to continue to make those life insurance payments up to today, where that family member has disappeared, when the court, under this amendment to the Evidence Act, decides that when the court, under this Evidence Amendment Act, decides that the loved one actually passed away, and passed away at the date of the incident of peril, Dorian, some 2 years prior, is the insurance company not only going to honor the life insurance policy, but also will the insurance company reimburse them for those months and in this case 2 years, maybe 3 years of life insurance payments that they've had to continue to make on the policy to keep it current while that loved one has been deemed to have disappeared and known to have disappeared. Maybe someone today can advise if, in fact, those families that have continued to have to keep their policies in place are going to be reimbursed for those months once that death certificate goes back to the date of incident of peril. Madam Speaker, that concludes my contribution on this issue of the amendment to the Evidence Act. Like the member for North Abaco, I think that it's good in what it does, and we can't deny that maybe it could have done more. But for now, Madam Speaker, if that's what we're aiming for, what's good for now, it's good with me. Madam Speaker, I would like to, as I close, recognize the attendance today by Pastor Nairn. Pastor Nairn, thank you very much for opening today's session. Really appreciate you being here with us. I also would like to formally recognize Archdeacon Drexel Gomez, who celebrated his Golden Jubilee within his church, as well as Father Cartwright. Both of them had, Father Cartwright celebrated his 40th anniversary last week at St. Agnes, and the service, the Golden Jubilee for the Archdeacon Drexel Gomez, was at the cathedral. Both services were very well attended, great Bahamians, well-respected men. We've had other instances that aren't quite as celebratory in St. Anne's. I'd like to recognize the passing of Bernard Ferguson, who was a member of the St. Anne's and Fox Hill family, brother of former Member of Parliament Chanel Ferguson, as well as last week the passing of Kervin Ferguson, who would have been the sibling, the brother of family members, including one of my great constituents who loves and appreciates me very much, Miss Teresa Ferguson. Finally, I recall, I think it was Pinewood, brought some attention to potholes and parks, and I can't sit down and ignore all of the chats that I get sent to me, but there is a bone-crushing, bone-shaking pothole on Prince Charles Drive opposite Super Value. I know the Minister of Works is out right now, but hopefully someone from his department is paying attention. I've already been in my constituency marking potholes on Eastern Road with the spray paint can and had to incur a cost to fill those out of the constituency budget. And now, Madam Speaker, because of the demands of my constituents with regard to this one on Prince Charles, which is really a hazard, a danger to drivers, I've had to do some investigation and found out that you can buy a bag of cold mix, so not the hot mix that comes smoking off the back of a truck, but you can buy a bag of cold mix that you can cut open and pour into the hole, and with the right tool, you can flatten it down sufficiently that instead of your constituents making an instant trip to Australia because of the depth of that hole, they can continue on their path in their vehicles and not have to spend their pensions on repairs. But if we can have that pothole repaired before Friday, I won't have to buy that bag of cold mix, and I would avoid any vehicles getting distracted, seeing my body on the road filling in a pothole. They might clip me, and that's a risk to my family, Madam Speaker, that I prefer not to take if the proper contracted parties address it. Finally, public parks and beaches issue. I do believe that there is a contractor assigned to do the park in between Sunset Ridge and Sapphire Ridge. So far, it's been seen to have been addressed once by persons not known to the Member of Parliament for St. Anne's. but the residents, it's probably the largest park in the St. Anne's constituency. The residents have been sending me photographs. The grass and the lawn is overgrown. The trees need some trimming. And I know that there is a catch-up period where we begin to maintain the equipment on the parks, but the few pieces of equipment on that park are also in need of some maintenance as well. So I'm glad to have the ear of these powerful members of government here today. I'm appreciative of their bill that they brought before the House, which will bring relief to those families in Abaco and Grand Bahama, as well as their extended families, possibly relocated families that are here in Nassau and other family islands now. And it would be interesting if someone could advise whether insurance companies will reimburse persons after they've gotten a death certificate for the families for all of these years that they've been making those monthly payments. I'm much obliged, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many?
I would wish to make a contribution to this timely debate, an important debate.
The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, making sure your mic is on. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too would wish to contribute to this important debate, particularly having lived through the devastation caused by hurricanes. I'm particularly mindful of Hurricanes Francis, Jane, Wilma, Matthew, Dorian. All had tremendous impact on Grand Bahama. Hurricane Francis was perhaps the first sign of the climate change phenomenon that we're now dealing with. It was when we saw devastation caused to West Grand Bahama, when many people in West End in particular, who had lived unaffected, unimpacted by weather conditions for decades, lost almost everything. Houses were swept away. Individuals were left pondering, left in states of depression, concerned about their future. I remember vividly, Madam Speaker, as we traveled the streets of West End, and the people gathered, and we were looking for individuals, and we found many who'd never wanted to leave West End, no matter the circumstances, and I stayed with them. Madam Speaker, they did not want to leave. But we saw individuals who, in fact, a wonderful woman who we never knew had a disabled child. And when we went to her house, the house was flooded. And Madam Speaker, we just could not figure out why she did not want to leave her home. We barged our way inside the house to discover her child on a bed. We then removed the child and removed her. Another gentleman was in a house, Madam Speaker, and we received a report that he could not come down the stairs, only to discover, Madam Speaker, that he was bleeding from his waist down. And at the time, Madam Speaker, we had no way of getting him from West End to Freeport because the bridge was not there. There was a fishing hole road. And the fishing hole road, you could not pass. And so West Grand Bahama, from the fishing hole road to West End, was separated from Freeport, separated from the Rand Memorial Hospital, separated from the healthcare services. Madam Speaker, there was a young man by the name of Marcus Garvey who was an ambulance driver. And he heard an appeal made by Diana Swan on the radio in an interview that I had with her. And explaining the situation, he broke the rules. He came over in spite of the circumstances, in spite of the fact that he's risking his own life. Came, was able to collect the elderly gentleman, got him to the hospital. He came out of hospital 8 days later. And when we were cleaning the streets, he came by simply to say thank you. He's now passed on, Madam Speaker. But Marcus Garvey would subsequently lose his job. But he was a man who risked his life. Hurricane Jane and Wilma, Troy Garvey, and others from the Holmes Rock area, they were able to find themselves, Madam Speaker, saving lives. They were on the waters with whatever equipment they could find, whatever machine was movable. They were saving lives, saving people, ensuring that the lives, and that is why, Madam Speaker, we talk about Hurricane Dorian, what happened subsequently. But the truth is, if it were not for the coward and the brave, and the cowardless behavior of so many young men, many others might have died. Many were, and would tell you the story of how they found themselves in their roofs, could not get out. Many were seeking safe and security, but it was so difficult, Madam Speaker. We lived through this. We lived through this, and I've asked for, and I continue to call for, the fact that we must do more, because we have a tendency to respond to the moment, and subsequent to the moment, we wait for the next event. When Hurricane Dorian passed our way, and it was confusing, and I don't point the finger at the former administration at all, I don't. Because truth be told, none of us anticipated or even expected the travesty. I remember the then Prime Minister on national TV talking about the impending surge and advising to leave the West and advising to come out of the West Grand Bahama area. But the reality is, Madam Speaker, the hurricane entered from the east, East End, Grand Bahama, where many had sought to find refuge, but had to flee and run for safety. Madam Speaker, the stories that you would subsequently hear, the stories of the many who were with their family members, the many who were holding on to trees, sitting in coconut trees, fighting for their lives, and breaking away when it was nothing more that they could do. You listen to the stories of the member for North Abaco and the same circumstances, the same stories, the same realities, where mothers were separated from husbands and their children were children. A young man told me how he watched his little girl, and all he saw was a hand just above the water. When the Prime Minister, present, but then leader of the opposition, visited East End and heard the stories and went by homes such as Pleasant Bridgewater, former member of this honorable place, and saw that everything was gone. Everything was gone, and we saw her family just looking for that relative. And that relative was gone. They didn't know where. And to this day, they have not heard. Madam Speaker, this happened in our country. This happened in our nation. This happened where you didn't have the answers. You didn't know what to say, what to do, how to bring comfort. I remember a young lady telling me of her aunt, who I knew very well, who prepared fish for me on many occasions. She had left Nassau, just came home to be with the family because this hurricane was coming. All she did was land, and they saw her no more. Madam Speaker, is one of the issues that I find to be so troubling is that when we seek to find answers to these difficult situations, we wish to point fingers. I, Madam Speaker, have a difficulty with that because having seen what can happen, having watched how people respond, having seen when Bahamians have difficulties when we get together, and I know the member for Marco City had his difficulties as well. I know the former member for East Grand Bahama, he had difficulties as well previously. I know when we had to, and I spoke to Ken Russell after one of the hurricanes, and he had difficulties. And Madam Speaker, for Grand Bahama in particular, like Abaco, we are still struggling from Francis, Jane, Wilma, and Dorian. The economy has not returned. The economy has not returned to what it used to be, Madam Speaker, and the trouble that we continue to have is that you're trying to build, and every year you're still wondering, are we, and should we, and could we? Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I remember some little schoolgirls when we were trying to clean up West End after Hurricane Francis. I remember I was standing in front of St. Mary Magdalene's Anglican Church, a bit tired, weary, but I was so concerned because we had lost one of our leading heroines of our community, Oglita Brown, and to my memory, I think it had lots to do with her depression subsequent to the hurricane. And these little girls came with just a can of some money, no more than $20, and their contribution, as they said, we want to help West End rebuild. It's little children. They felt the pain. And so, Mr. Deputy, the truth is all Bahamians, from Anagua to Bimini, have felt the wrath of the storms. All Bahamians have had to come to the realization, and one of the things in Grand Bahama, Mr. Deputy, is when you were standing on the water lines or the food lines, didn't matter if you were white or black, didn't matter if you were rich or poor. We were all in the same circumstances. Everybody stand up. Nobody got water. Nobody got ice. Nobody got food. It was a rough time. Nobody got electricity. It was rough. But we hung together and made it through. And that is what I believe we should celebrate more in our country, Mr. Deputy. The fact that we have, as a people, we've stood together in very difficult times. Yes, we have our times when we have the political jargon, we have our differences, we fight the democracy, it's alive. But there are moments when we do come together. and the moments when we do stand as a people. And as we celebrate the 49th anniversary of our country, I think it's imperative that we stop. It's imperative that we think, because we must all remember, and I remind us all in this place, that Leviticus 23:27 says that the 7th month and the 10th day is a day of atonement. That's our Independence Day. And that day is when we're supposed to stop and think about how far we have come as a nation, where we have been, and where we're going. And this is an ideal debate to do that, because in the midst of all that we've had, look how far we've come. Look at how far we have moved our nation. It is the Prime Minister of Barbados who's made the point that if it were not for the heavy cost of recovery subsequent to climate change and all that's happened as a result, our countries might be much further ahead. But in spite of it all, we fell down, and as a nation, we've been able to get back up. I want to congratulate the Prime Minister, member for Cat Island, El Salvador, who has been heralded for his leadership to deal with the climate change issue, to draw attention to not only the Commonwealth, but the world community on the serious nature of the issue as faced by developing countries. Our countries are challenged, and we need assistance, we need support, and we cannot get the same, Mr. Deputy, if we're not out there beating and pounding. But our Prime Minister has made it a part of his immediate leadership to take the issue to the world. And we must appreciate. We've heard many stories in this place of how the weather conditions, and we can't explain, it's just raining and flooding. And every day you hear more stories. I was listening to some stories about in Africa yesterday about the rain, about the drought that's been because of a lack of rain. There's a drought, and they have a difficulty there now, so they don't have the food. So the changing circumstances. That's why we must always give God thanks for where we are and celebrate where we've come from. Because, Mr. Deputy, could have been rough. I wish and I do hope that the members for Abaco, together with the government, that we could find a way to ensure that the resting place for those individuals who were recovered, the bodies, that it could be a better place, that it could look a little bit more stately, that it could have a look where we understand we are moralizing these individuals who lost their lives. I don't like the way it looks, Kalani, I don't. I was there and I took a look. I don't like the way we've allowed, we put the bodies there, it's not good. It's not a cemetery, in my view, that's honorable for people who died the way they did. And I believe it's imperative that we take a look at these because they died. Could have been you, could have been me, but for the grace of God. What the Grand Bahama Port Authority did in East End, I think is commendable. They have a memorial. I think it's commendable. You'd never forget. You'd never forget, because you must remember, because in our country, it's where we've come from. It's what we've had to do. It's the tragedy, the circumstances, all that makes a people, makes us stronger. Today, we're able to say, yes, we can, because of where we've been. When that hurricane pounded this country, we were just lost. When Dorian came, the world could not believe. The world came, the world gave us support, the world gave us help, and I wish to thank all those who contributed. The truth is, there's still work to be done in the repair. We've heard the member for Pinewood speak of the DRA and the work that they intend to do. The minister responsible for urban development, the member for Marathon, she and our ministry, we are now engaged in the home repairs, and we intend to intensify because many have had the greatest difficulty ever since. The minister responsible for housing, we all know of her aggressive nature, and we all appreciate the work she's doing in Abaco. I'm so proud of the work she's doing to bring people's lives back to a place where they can have relief. That's why this legislation is so important to us, Mr. Deputy. It's foreclosure. It's to cause foreclosure. It's to bring you closer to ending a chapter, albeit you'll never forget. The truth is, many are still hoping for closure. So, Mr. Deputy, that's why West End supports this legislation. I support it because I know from the settlement of West End throughout 8 Mile Rock, we're still struggling and we're still fighting. We're engaged now, Mr. Deputy, in a massive cleanup, a transformational cleanup that's taking place in West End and 8 Mile Rock. And the magic of it all, Mr. Deputy, is it's to take us away from a negative era, to put us in a place where we see a better future. And Mr. Deputy, if I may say so myself, the work that's being done is incredibly fantastic. The work being done by young men and women of the community, all working together, all working for the improvement of the constituency is simply great. And I want to thank them and congratulate them for the work that they're doing. So, Mr. Deputy, this legislation is a step forward. This legislation is hearing the cries of the people, hearing the individuals who have been asking for closure. It is understanding the circumstances. It is trying to bring people to a point where they can move ahead and move on. But at the same time, Mr. Deputy, you must appreciate that we are in the hurricane belt. You must appreciate, Mr. Deputy, that we do have to contend with climate change. It is important, Mr. Deputy, and as the member for Central and South Abaco said earlier, he said we should begin preparation now, not wait until it's here, not wait until the hurricane's knocking at your door and you cannot do anything. We should begin preparation. Everything we do must take into consideration that during these months, from June to November, and even earlier now, we are subjected to, and we have no forewarning. We just know something might happen. And if it does, Mr. Deputy, we must all be ready. But again, I wish to salute the Bahamian people for standing together, for fighting together, for lifting brothers and sisters through difficult times. I want to thank the staff of the Ministry of Social Services in particular. Many of the people from Abaco moved here to the capital. Many of the staff had to move as well, and to provide the services that was put in place by the then government, to provide housing, to provide meals, to look after, to give all of those who were in need relief. And they did a good job. I wish to congratulate the staff of the Ministry of Social Services. That was, I think, one of the great moments of the ministry, rising to the occasion. I also wish to congratulate the staff in Grand Bahama, because they've had to, and still do, Mr. Deputy, they still do provide incredible service because of the needs. Many have not gotten back on their feet yet. And because they haven't, Mr. Deputy, we have no excuse. And when we find issues that we must contend, we deal. And we don't find any excuses. And there are times when we don't know. But once we know, we move. Mr. Deputy, we are a month away from the opening of offices in East Grand Bahama. I spoke with a member of Parliament recently for social services and for renewal. And that is to ensure that the people of the East don't have to come to Freeport for services. We will bring the services to the people in the East. Similarly, we are doing the same for West End because years ago, the social service offices were shut down in West End. And so the urban renewal offices are being reopened, and social service will have an office within the structure. And that will open, I believe, in another week or so. So the reality about it all is we're taking the services to the people. And if we can give the services to the people, we're helping to take people out of their difficulty, out of their stress, out of their depression, because some are still suffering from depression. I was so shocked to learn from the minister responsible for health of the number of people who are now mental illness. I was so shocked to come to the reality that many are still going through that difficulty and all that happened subsequent to. And many still cannot hear the thunder or see the lightning or get very frantic when rain appears. I didn't know that, Mr. Deputy. And having been told that now as the minister, and we're moving to try to find ways to bring resolution and bring services to such people. But the reality is, that's what we have to deal with every day. And so this legislation is but a step, an important step in our efforts. And I'd wish to thank the Attorney General, who has been working assiduously very hard, and the Attorney General, who has ensured that we have a very busy agenda. But this legislation is an answer to the needs of the people at a critical time, important for our country as we move forward. I too, Mr. Deputy, before I sit, would like to congratulate the former Commissioner of Police, Commissioner Paul Rowe, now retired. Outstanding. I've had reasons to work with him in the past. I've had reasons to call upon him in the past. And he's always been a professional, very dignified in his service to the country. And as he said yesterday, to ensure always the integrity of his force, himself, and this nation. And I wish to congratulate the new commissioner. The truth is, Mr. Deputy, when the Prime Minister was speaking yesterday at the services, we might forget that that man was shot. Clayton Fernando was shot. An attempted armed robbery. He was shot. When you talk about a hero, when you talk about someone who has gone that route, many don't, but he was shot and fought for his life. And never once did I see him afraid, losing his bravery and his strength. And I remember the stories, and many were taken aback when it happened, but he rose up, and now he's leading. And we must give that thought when you think about these men and women who serve our country. They protect us every day. They guide us. They give us the security to go to bed at night and wake up the next morning and know that we have a day ahead and we can move about our country. Yes, we do have some issues with crime right now, but I sense, Mr. Deputy, that the mood of this country is going to change and that we're going to get to the point where we understand one life is just too many, and we're going to fight for and cause for the lives of others to be saved. So, Deputy, I wish to congratulate the new commissioner, wish him the best, and join the Speaker in offering him our full support. Mr. Deputy, West Grand Bahama, Bimini supports this legislation. It's a step in moving us forward. Thank you, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honourable Member. as many. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. First and foremost, I want to thank all those people, especially those from the Kalani constituency, who was praying for me during my illness, as I've just gotten over COVID. And I can say that I would not have been here unless I was cleared and subsequently had a negative COVID test. Mr. Deputy, the Commissioner of Police was sworn in yesterday, and many people, I've been told, was asking the question as to why was I not present. Besides being bedridden with COVID, there seemed to be a breakdown of communication, because I had not received any invitation and I had not known of such event until yesterday. And this has been a chronic problem, and I asked the Prime Minister to investigate that matter, as in the past, this was all done by Cabinet, and I've been informed that this matter has now been moved, invitations and events have now been moved to the Prime Minister's office, and for some reason, I've been left off such lists. Former Prime Minister Ingram was present, former Prime Minister Christie was present, and only myself was absent, not receiving an invitation. So it was not that I did not want to be there, but besides my illness, and I could not be there, invitation had not been received. Mr. Deputy, I want to, at this time, congratulate the Commissioner of, the new Commissioner of Police, and I want to say that he has a difficult job ahead. But Mr. Deputy, as I move into this debate, I would only like to ask the Minister of Health that he investigate as to what's going on with the COVID within our community, within our country. Because I'm convinced within myself, and speaking to other colleagues, they too are, that we are dealing with a new variant. Because besides suffering the normal symptoms that one would see with COVID, I also suffered neurological manifestations in that not only was I experiencing weakness and dizziness and sometimes difficulty moving, but I was also finding myself, rather than walking through the door, walking into the wall, totally disoriented. And there are many who believe that we may have a new variant here in New Providence, and this in the Bahamas, and this new variant may have some neurological manifestations. And I would ask the Ministry of Health to look into that so that individuals can be forewarned as to what to expect. But Mr. Deputy, when I arrived in Marsh Harbor in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, it appeared to me and many others that an atomic bomb had gone off. And the vibrant community I knew so well was devastated by the strongest storm to the land in our country's history. And Hurricane Dorian had maximum sustained winds of about 185 miles per hour. And the storm gust was as high, and in some instances higher, than 220 miles per hour. The surge that we experienced was more than 20 feet, caused by the devastation to parts of Abaco. And I remembered very well informing the Bahamian populace that we would experience a surge that would have been 3 times my height. And I reminded them that I was 6 foot. Therefore, we could have expected surge of 18 feet or more. I also reminded them that the storm would not hit the southern aspect of Abaco and urged them all to move to the southern part of Abaco as we would be able to save more lives as the central and northern Abaco would be affected. Hurricane Dorian was one of the strongest storms ever recorded in our nation's history. And much of the work of generations of residents of the northern Bahamas was wiped out during its passage. The Bahamas has a strong building code and a people familiar with storms. However, Mr. Deputy, Hurricane Dorian's ferocity was historic. Most tragically, there was significant loss of life in those confirmed dead, and those who went missing and are presumed dead. Families in Abaco, the Abaco Keys, and Grand Bahama still mourn the loss of their loved ones. In our current law, the presumption of death is 7 years for a missing person. That is a very, very long time. And after death, there are many matters to restore pertaining to assets and estates. For example, a mother with children to take care of is severely disadvantaged if she is without access to the resources of her husband, who went missing during Hurricane Dorian and is presumed dead. It is difficult for families and loved ones to rebuild their lives when they have to wait 7 years in order to resolve practical and financial matters. We as legislators have heard from the families and loved ones of the missing. They want the law amended, and we are here today, Mr. Deputy, to do that. The Evidence Amendment number 22, Bill 2022 before us would assist those loved ones who are presumed to have died during Hurricane Dorian and similar types of natural disasters that may occur. The bill cuts the period for the presumption of death to 2 years from 7 in cases of peril. This would cover those who were missing from the storm and are presumed dead after proper inquiries are made. I support this bill. My administration did all it could in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian. As the worst natural disaster in Bahamian history, Hurricane Dorian caused $3.4 billion in losses and damage, more than our budget. So you can imagine, Mr. Deputy, 1 entire year of our budget plus more wiped out. We spent tens of millions of dollars in emergency assistance, debris removal, infrastructure restoration, home rebuilding assistance, small business aid, and tax concessions after the storm. And most of all, Mr. Deputy, most of all, we had challenges initially with security when we were informed by residents in the Abaco community that crime had escalated, theft had increased, and God knows what else. And to deal with that matter, we had to communicate with the government, Prime Minister Holness of Jamaica, Prime Minister Rowley of Trinidad, and Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados. Those individuals were called and asked whether they can assist us with our security situation that had broken down in the Abaco community, and they responded. And within days, Jamaica dispatched its defense force here to Abaco to assist us with our security. Barbados made a commitment to dispatch their police force, members of their police force, if more was needed. And of course, Prime Minister Rowley of Trinidad made a commitment that they would dispatch members of their defense force if more assistance was needed. But Mr. Deputy, this shows what we did to deal with the security problem that we faced during this hurricane. And only 6 months after Dorian, 6 months, the pandemic began. It will take the work of successive administrations to fully restore the disaster zones to their former vibrancy. It will take the work of successive administrations to address problems faced by the residents of the North due to this catastrophic event. I support efforts by this administration to assist the residents of Abaco, the Abaco Keys, and Grand Bahama. Whereas it was the mindset of the now governing party to oppose and criticize our administration when we sought to help Bahamians during Hurricane Dorian and the pandemic, I chose to stand in support of common sense legislation brought forward by them that help our people. Mr. Deputy, I encourage the current administration to continue the recovery and redevelopment work we started after Hurricane Dorian. The pandemic has been less severe in recent months. I encourage the administration to accelerate its work and plans in the North. The people of Abaco, the Abaco Keys, and Grand Bahama are hardworking and they are independent. They deserve the administration's full attention, as do the people of New Providence, who are facing remarkable crises of crime and violence. Mr. Deputy, there are only 4 of us alive today in our country who have been Prime Minister. The job is around the clock and demanding. There are files that require your review, documents to sign day and night. And in the middle of the night, files are brought to you to sign. Agreements to be reached, and crisis after crisis to be addressed. The member for Cat Island came to power at a difficult time in our country's history. The effects of Hurricane Dorian remain. The pandemic continues. There's historic inflation and a cost of living crisis, along with a crime and violence problem that is worsening. We need strong and focused leader in these times to address these problems. The level of crime and violence in New Providence is alarming. Last week, there was killing after killing and shooting after shooting. New Providence appears as if it is a gunman's town, with the Davis administration appearing clueless as to how to address the problem. This year has been a bloody one in our capital. The media reports that there have been 75 murders in 2022, with most of them occurring in New Providence. And according to an eyewitness news analysis, we ended July with murders of 30%, up 30%. I may even be wrong about the murder total because it's so difficult to keep up with the large number of killings. There were a record number of murders in March, and at this pace, there may be another annual murder record this year, surpassing the grim total of 2015. It is now obvious to right-thinking Bahamians that this administration has no plan as to how to address this crisis. Week after week, month after month, New Providence gets more unsafe with the elected government doing nothing we can see to combat the problem. The Prime Minister continues to take advice on crime from Rodney Munker, which is stunning to Bahamians. This is who the member for Cat Island chose to be one of the expert visitors. And Mr. Deputy, at the end, if time permit, this is the same Rodney Munker who said publicly that if the government planned any type of invasion or removal of illegals, he will inform them in advance. And if time permit, I will play that tape with his mouth. What is Mr. Munker doing to help the crime fight to justify this pay by the state? Mr. Deputy, leadership is hard. It is difficult. It requires focus, it requires discipline, and it requires dedication. Mr. Deputy, I was shocked to read the remarks by the member for Freetown in the newspaper on Tuesday. The headline in a story in the Nassau Guardian on Tuesday, July 5th, 2022 read, I quote, "Prepare for more police shootings," end quote. The story quoted by the member for Freetown is who is the National Security Minister. The article said, Minister of National Security Wayne Monroe yesterday advised Bahamians to brace for more police-involved shootings as police beef up resources to combat increased crime. It went on, we can expect them to have more manpower resources, Monroe told The Guardian. That will not, he went on to say, that will not stop who have decided that either, one, they're going to be involved deliberately in gangs and engage in street wars, or, as we have been seeing in some of the homicides, people just don't seem to be able to control their temper and stab people over a fight or shoot people over a fight. He said, that won't stop it. The police apprehending them, being more on the spot, won't stop it. The more resources the police have to be available on the spot may actually have the effect of you having more police-involved shootings, which the public should prepare itself for. These are the words of the Minister of National Security. Further went on, the incoming commissioner has forewarned that as the police get more resources to be more saturated on the streets, as people decide to continue to drive around with firearms, there is an ability for them to get into conflict with police with the intended result. Further, and so, we have said at this moment that as they get more resources, manpower or otherwise, the public, the Minister of National Security, listen to me, Professor, the public ought to be aware You are not. Mr. Deputy, the public ought to be aware that may be something that may happen. Mr. Deputy, what the Minister of National Security is saying is that essentially nothing can be done. I must ask the question, has he given up and demonstrated that he is unable to handle the situation?
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
The honourable member has totally misconstrued what the minister said. That is, if the member is going to quote, he can. No. If the honourable member is going to quote, he can quote and adopt, but he cannot quote and misconstrue, because I heard what apparently was read, I heard what was paraphrased, and I heard his conclusion, which is totally inconsistent with what he read.
Thank you, honourable member.
Thank you very much. As I said, I have a table at the end, but when a minister has made such statement, the interpretation, not only to me, but the public and many whom I canvass, is that the minister basically has given up in saying that there's very little.
The chair recognizes the member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The honourable member, if he wants to invent a version and put it in the mouth of the Minister of National Security, then he can engage in his invention. But he cannot read an article. He hasn't said that he adopts it. But if he adopts it, he cannot then misconstrue it. Unless you wanted another support for an invention that the minister says that he cannot do anything. That's not what the article said. Yes.
Thank you.
I would argue with the member afterward, but I want to complete now, and I understand he is a veteran and I am a veteran, and I understand what he's trying to do. Mr. Deputy, I will withdraw nothing. It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable for the administration to just announce that the police will be shooting more people. It is totally unacceptable. And Mr. Deputy, when a minister can make statements as was stated, when a member can make statements as was stated on the news, the member, listen, I understand English and you understand English. I interpret and you interpret. You accept yours and I accept mine. You accept yours. But Mr. Deputy, a minister who makes such statements obviously should not be in charge of national security when we are having such dilemmas and crime that are occurring in this country. And the Prime Minister has very, very difficult decisions. That is what leadership is about. He has extreme difficult decisions to make. But you cannot have a leader of national security making such statements. Police have the legal right to use deadly force to protect their lives or to protect the lives of members of the public. The law prescribes when deadly force could be used. Deadly force could only be used by law enforcement within the scenarios set out in the law. We need more officers on patrol. We need patrols to be more consistent. However, Mr. Deputy, the administration must be careful that its rhetoric does not create an atmosphere in which excessive force occurs indiscriminately. Rather than loose talk that is dangerous.
Member.
o'clock hour. So, Mr. Deputy, the member has 7 minutes left. We will continue. I ask for the business of the House to be extended beyond 1 o'clock.
Is there a seconder? It's been moved and seconded that that the business of the House to continue past 1 p.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of the House is carried past 1 p.m. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. That's why I love you, West End. Rather than loose talk, you should have been Minister of National Security. Rather than loose talk, that is dangerous. This administration needs to come up with a real plan to prevent crime and to swiftly punish violent offenders who are determined to harm others. Thus far, the governing side is failing miserably. The member for Cat Island, Mr. Deputy, likes to explain the problem, but he's short on solutions. It is an extraordinary mark of failure that during the first full year of the member of Cat Island's administration, the country may have a murder record. Mr. Deputy, I would like to congratulate the new Commissioner of Police, Clayton Fernanda. Commissioner Fernanda is an officer with much experience. I wish him every success in his term as head of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. The new commissioner is settling into the role at a time when there is a significant amount of violence occurring in New Providence. He has much work to do. And while dealing with the crime crisis in front of us, it is also important that Commissioner Fernanda updates the country soon on investigation into the member for Elizabeth. A serious allegation was leveled against the member by a police officer. The Police Staff Association issued a strong statement on the matter. Bahamians are curious as to the outcome of this investigation. It is important that it be concluded in a proper and timely fashion. No.
Mr. Deputy.
The chair recognizes the member for Fort Charlotte.
On a point of order, it is improper for this honorable member to make this imputation of improper motive, personal reflection on this honorable member. It is contrary to the rules, and I'm surprised that a member of his tenure would use his parliamentary privilege to infringe upon the privilege of another member. Because what this honorable member is seeking to do is making on the floor an allegation of criminal wrongdoing. And the honorable member know better. And to set a standard not only for us, who look up to the member as being an honorable member, but for the country to make such a vile and baseless allegation against this honorable member.
Thank you, member.
Do the honorable
much, Mr. Deputy.
withdraw.
I'm not drawing anything. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I have a right.
Can I officially ask you, are you going to withdraw?
And I can officially say no. Say no.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable member.
Thank you.
In that case,
I am making.
We ask that the chair strike it from the record. You're making an allegation, and you do not have a right to make an allegation of criminal wrongdoing.
I have a right to inquire into what the public has seen.
You made an allegation.
One minute, Kalani.
For Kalani is obviously very wrong in his approach, but we have a right to inquire as well. And perhaps he'd wish to, whilst he's on his feet before the time elapses, he'd wish to talk about the statements made by the former Commissioner of Police, Mr. Paul Rule, because we have a right to ask questions as well, and we'd like to know, because there are many issues that you must deal with If you intend to take us down that road, well, please, whilst you're on your feet.
Mr. Deputy, that's a matter of dress, and I understand what they're trying to do. Mr. Deputy, an inquiry, an investigation has been launched. And
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fort Charlotte. Member, 1 minute. Can you let me know what?
Yes, I'm specifically referring to Rule 30.
Rule 30?
17, imputations of improper motive and personal reflection on members shall be dealt with by the chair under the rules relating to order in the House or committee. I heard the honorable member make an imputation of improper motives and personal reflection against another member. Similarly, when any offensive, abusive, insulting words. Now, the thing is this, it is an improper imputation or an imputation of an improper motive and a negative reflection. Mr. Deputy Speaker, robust debate about public affairs and the affairs of our country does not give one the right to make an improper or an imputation. I would say it even went beyond an imputation, wouldn't you say? Right? I mean, seriously. It went beyond an imputation. It was an actual allegation, which is improper.
I am asking and inquiring as to how advanced we are with investigation. That is important. The police said, allow me to finish. The police said they are investigating. They are investigating. Mr. Deputy, I am only referring back to a similar situation with a different scenario in 2015 when the member for Cat Island was then the Deputy Prime Minister. And a similar event occurred, not exactly, with a minister at that time. And an investigation by the police was launched. The then Prime Minister of the country, Perry Christie, asked the minister, since an investigation is going on into his portfolio, he should step down and retain the other portfolio. He subsequently gave up one of his parliamentary portfolio, we maintained the other component of the portfolio, and the exact words by the Prime Minister at that time, Perry Christie, was, and I quote, "It is the proper and right thing to do." In 2015, it was the proper thing, but in 2022, it is not.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is Philip Brave Davis. Right? And the grandstanding, I understand what's going on over there, you know. They need to make their mark while they, you know, he has to demonstrate that he may still have it. Marco City? See, I know that he pulled this, you know, he's no longer sitting where he was directed to sit next to you. Right, and he's gone back to where he was. Well, Speaker, let me just say this, right? As far as I'm aware, my inquiries told me whatever he's now promoting to be an investigation was never an investigation. I understand there was some, what I call, for my purposes, for the execution of my duties, nothing more than an interior inquiry to determine whether was any truth or otherwise before they moved to investigate. Yeah. And that's where it lies. And if he wants to know, he just need to go to the police, find out. It's an interior inquiry, and nothing more, nothing less. I've spoken with the minister, and I'm satisfied of her explanation to me and to others. And I cannot dismiss the fact that much of what was talked about, I'm not a social media, addict like others, but I was privy to a social media photograph of what's supposed to be the incident. It appeared to me that a police was moving another police and perhaps chastising him from what I saw on this video. So and I think that's all in public domain. So that's why I say it was more of an interior inquiry, not an investigation. And we wait to hear if there's anything. I would have thought something would have happened by now. The fact that nothing has happened tells you that nothing happened.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, by profession, I am a physician, a doctor, by profession. Once a patient comes to our office, the very first line that we write is CO, complain of. In other words, a complete history of what occurred. Also recorded is the treatment, investigation, and diagnosis. If we want to prove anything, summon the record of the health record, or subpoena the physician. The facts are always there within medical immunity. I am a physician. I know what we write, and I know how it's done. If medication is given, medications are given.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Well, I'm a lawyer by profession. I'm a lawyer as per profession. And whatever you wrote as a physician is what was told to you. Not what you see, saw, or otherwise. They tell you, I have this. And from what they tell you, that's what you prescribe. So you act on hearsay from the person who's giving it to you. Right? So that is the point. Right? And you don't need to tell the police how to do their investigations. You don't have to do that. They know how to do their investigations or how to do their inquiries. But as a doctor, I come to you, I say, I'm sick.
I hope you don't come to me
So I wanted to respond, but I said, wait. I have a good retort. I have a retort for you. I understand why things are, little Google up there now. It's not just a loss. It's not just no longer is a leader. I suspect. Anyhow, I'll leave that. But suffice it to say that the only thing a doctor would write is what was told, what the patient report to you, and then from that report, you'll do your own little evaluation. And even when you find that, you might say, well, okay, since you say you heard, take that.
This matter can easily be resolved if you subpoena the records. I have not spoken to the doctor, but I know how we work. I know how we enumerate our findings. I know what medication we would give for specific pathological effect. So we know that. So this can be resolved easily. Mr. Deputy, as I conclude, it is necessary for me to ask what the Davis administration is doing regarding the high gas prices we face. This is a problem across the country. In New Providence, prices hover around $7 per gallon. Some family islands, communities have had to pay as much as $9 per gallon. The government makes big big money from its fuel taxes. It is disgraceful and it is heartless that this administration has not cut the gas taxes in order to give Bahamians some relief at the pumps. These sky-high prices are making it difficult for working-class Bahamians to fill their cars to get to work. These sky-high prices are making it difficult for fishermen to fill their vessels to go out on seas to make a living. A reduction in the gas taxes won't bring the price of fuel all the way down, but every little bit of savings would help families and businesses during these difficult times. It is not good enough for the governing party to just watch the problem and do nothing. The people elected you. They fired me to bring solutions to the problems they face. The administration is just leaving the high gas taxes in place while the people suffer day after day, barely able to put enough gas in their tanks to get from place to place. Mr. Deputy, it is time for this administration to govern with more compassion and greater seriousness to bring aid to our people and to protect and to advance the security and safety of the Bahamian people. Again, I support this bill, and I will support the various initiatives to help those recovering in the northern disaster zone. Mr. Deputy, as time permits, I would play with your permission. And I understand that you may not want it, but there's evidence that the advisor, the security advisor to the government, has made statements that he will inform individuals with respect to illegality in advance of the government's movement so as to abate or stop such event from coming. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Pine Ridge.
We should now take the recess for the lunch break. And we resume at 3 o'clock this afternoon, Mr. Deputy.
Is there a second, though? It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House be suspended until 3 p.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of the House is suspended until 3 p.m.
All right.